Well, welcome into CBN News' coverage of the inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. I'm Dan Andros, joined here by Trey Goins-Phillips. We'll be walking you up here. YouTube audience, especially you, we're going to be monitoring your chat as we always do if you've been here for one of these events for us. As you can see now, Kamala Harris is arriving. We've seen just moments ago President Obama, President George W. Bush, former President Bill Clinton, all are in attendance, all have joined in. So we will be joining CBN's John Jessup and Jenna Browder here in just a minute, and we will have all of the ceremony as it goes. So Trey, welcome.
Yeah, it's going to be a busy day, and I'm interested to see how the media is going to end up covering all of this as the day progresses. But you know, obviously we're glad to be here, and I'm thankful for CBN, for FaithWire, to just be carrying this live for us to see, and hopefully we'll get some good commentary, good analysis from CBN like they usually offer. So I'm looking forward to today, even though it's not the outcome a lot of people wanted. It's always interesting to see how the transition of power shapes up.
Indeed, and we've been monitoring the comments as we always do. We enjoy hearing your perspective, and I know today is an emotional day, I know, for a lot of people, so let's just try to keep it civil there in the chat. We'll be monitoring it, trying to answer any questions you have, but I mean, we're looking for some comments here. I'm looking at Katie, who says that I didn't vote for Biden and Harris, but I am not the one who puts people in office. God appoints kings and rulers. I will pray for them and ask God to protect them and our nation. Those are wise words, Katie, because ultimately God is sovereign. You know, we have to do our part. We have to pursue the people and policies we think best represent God and his values. But at the end of the day, God is the one who lets kings rise and fall. And none of that happens apart from his hands. So that's what we believe at CBN. And that's great to see comments like that from people like Katie. So thank you for being here. Let us know where you're from. We always do this. We enjoy seeing where you're watching from, usually people from all around the globe, which is phenomenal. But we do need to be praying because we've seen President-elect Biden, the theme of this message that he's going to be delivering today, Trey, is supposed to be America United. But at the same time, you know, he's been indicating what some of his first moves are going to be in office, and a lot of them are things that should concern Christians, such as, you know, signaling early to Planned Parenthood that they're going to kind of be restored to favored status. So the Equality Act, issues of great concern for Christians that we will be keeping an eye on, and we will be reporting on with great interest at CBN and at FaithWire. And so there is a lot to be watching for. I know some people in the comments that are frustrated, perhaps Trump supporters, saying, you know, why do I want to watch this? And well, we're going to be living with this president and this vice president for the next, you know, at least 4 years. So we should be informed and know what they have planned. And we should be praying for them. I mean, the Bible's clear. We need to be praying for our leaders and our rulers, regardless of if we agree with them or not.
Yeah, and I think so. I was struck last night, thinking the night before, obviously the inauguration, and that so many people are still dealing with normal life. You know, this is a big deal, obviously, whenever we inaugurate a president. But there's a great, you know, to kind of choose to let it just be another day. I want it to be. You know, there are so many people who are going through things and enduring things that are going to be happening whether or not Trump is in office or Biden is in office. Those difficulties don't go away because a new president is sworn in. And I think we have an obligation to be informed, but we also have an obligation, I think, to just continue doing the next right thing in our everyday life, helping people who are struggling, who are dealing with difficult circumstances, dealing with difficult situations, because those things don't rise and fall on who's in office. Obviously we want to be informed, like I said, but we need to put it in the right perspective. And I hope that I'm preaching to myself too, that we can all be better about that in the years to come, in the days to come, because there's a lot of division in the country right now, but there's still a lot of opportunity for Christians to just do the right thing in their communities, and help people who are hurting, regardless of who's in office. So maybe just let's get off Twitter over the next few days, and just try to be there for our fellow man and woman.
Yeah, and I saw some comments here in the comments section right now. Thank you all for commenting from Brooklyn, New York. We got Michigan. We got all these places. I'll go through those in just a second. But somebody asked if Trump was attending. No, he's not attending. I'm breaking sort of a tradition here. He is not attending. He gave his final comments to the nation last night in a recorded speech, which we have on our podcast 4 and 3 and extended, and also on cbn.com. We covered it. A lot of media, like Twitter, like you said, get off Twitter. They just didn't bother covering it. But Vice President Mike Pence will be there and taking part in, a lot of the ritualistic sort of ceremonies that happen with the transfer of power. A lot of traditional things obviously happen at this particular time. And, President Obama attended when Trump won and was gracious in that. And for his part was there. And Mike Pence will be there. President Trump is on his way to Florida. God bless from Switzerland. Judith, wow. In Switzerland. I got a friend who moved to Switzerland, and she takes the most amazing pictures. It is the most beautiful place I think I've ever seen, at least in pictures. I've never been there. You ever been to Switzerland, Trey?
I have not been to Switzerland, but I'd like to go. I'd like to go there and ski sometime,
Yeah, I don't ski. I think I'm a little terrified of the hill, and I said I would get down. Let's see here. I'm looking. I'm watching from Tennessee, so go ahead. If you're new, you're just joining in here, go ahead and give a roll call. We like to find out where everybody's watching from. We're thankful you're here with CBN, and it looks like Biden is coming in.
It looks like it might actually be snowing in D.C. right now too, Dan.
Yeah. And we're talking to the control, and we're going to be handing it off to CBN's coverage here in a minute, but have a bit of a tech issue that I'm going to be working out. So go ahead, Trey. I'll keep going.
I think it's interesting to see the backdrop that we're up against right country with the pandemic, with all these regulations and restrictions going on. We see so many people gathered tightly together right now on the stage, while there are so few people in the audience. So Biden's got a big task ahead of him. I hope that we can just have some unity there as far as getting us all of these restrictions, because it's not a good place for us to be. I know you, Dan, talked about that on the podcast about the impact that these restrictions have had. Yep. So fingers crossed.
Here, Trey, so we're gonna go ahead and listen into what Amy Klobuchar has to say.
Perfect.
Members of Congress and the judicial branch, former presidents and first ladies, vice presidents, leaders from abroad, and a whole bunch of Bidens. America, welcome to the 59th presidential inauguration, where in just a few moments, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will take their solemn oaths. This ceremony is the culmination of 244 years of a democracy. It is the moment when leaders brought to this stage by the will of the people promise to be faithful to our Constitution, to cherish it and defend it. It is the moment when they become, as we all should be, guardians of our country. Have we become too jaded, too accustomed to the ritual of the passing of the torch of democracy to truly appreciate what a blessing and a privilege it is to witness this moment? I think not. 2 weeks ago, when an angry, violent mob staged an insurrection and desecrated this temple of our democracy, it awakened us to our responsibilities as Americans. This is the day when our democracy picks itself up, brushes off the dust, and does what America always does: goes forward as a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This conveyance of a sacred trust between our leaders and our people takes place in front of this shining Capitol dome for a reason. When Abraham Lincoln gave his first inaugural address in front of this Capitol, the dome was only partially constructed, braced by ropes of steel. He promised he would finish it. He was criticized for spending funds on it during the Civil War. To those critics, he replied, "If the people see the Capitol going on, it is a sign we intend the Union shall go on." And it did, and it will. Generations of Americans gave their lives to preserve our republic in this place. Great legislation to protect civil rights and economic security and lead the world was debated and crafted under this dome. Now it falls on all of us, not just the two leaders we are inaugurating today, to take up the torch of our democracy, not as a weapon of political arson, but as an instrument for good. We pledge today never to take our democracy for granted as we celebrate its remarkable strength. We celebrate its resilience, its grit. We celebrate the ordinary people doing extraordinary things for our nation, the doctors and nurses on the front line of this pandemic, the officers in the Capitol, a new generation never giving up hope for justice. We celebrate a new president, Joe Biden, who vows to restore the soul of America and cross the river of our divides to a higher plane. And we celebrate our first African American, first Asian American, and first woman vice president, Kamala Harris, who stands on the shoulders of so many on this platform who have forged the way to this day. When she takes the oath of office, little girls and boys across the world will know that anything and everything is possible. And in the end, that is America, our democracy, a country of so much good. And today, on these Capitol steps and before this glorious field of flags, we rededicate ourselves to its cause. Thank you. It is now my honor to introduce to you the senator who has worked with me and so many others to make this ceremony possible, my friend and the chair of the inaugural committee, Missouri Senator Roy Blunt.
And you are watching special live coverage of Joseph R. Biden's inauguration on the west front of the U.S. Capitol. That was Senator Amy Klobuchar, who you just saw speaking there. And now Senator Roy Blunt.
Well, I should have known when Senator Klobuchar got involved, at least there'd be a touch of snow up here this morning. Of all the things we'd considered, I don't think snow was on my agenda till I walked out the door a moment ago. But thank you, Senator Klobuchar, and thanks to the other members of the Joint Congressional Committee on the Inauguration as we officially begin the 59th inaugural ceremony. I also want to thank the Joint Committee staff and our partners, particularly our security partners, for the way they've dealt with unprecedented circumstances. When I chaired the inauguration 4 years ago, I shared President Reagan's 1981 description of this event as commonplace and miraculous. Commonplace because we've done it every 4 years since 1789. Miraculous because we've done it every 4 years since 1789. Americans have celebrated this moment during war, during depression, and now during pandemic. Once again, all three branches of our government come together as the Constitution envisions. Once again, we renew our commitment to our determined democracy, forging a more perfect union. That theme for this inauguration, our determined democracy, forging a more perfect union, was announced by the Joint Committee before the election, with the belief that the United States can only fulfill its promise and set an example for others if we are always working to be better than we have been. The Constitution established that determined democracy with its first three words, declaring the people as the source of the government. The Articles of Confederation hadn't done that. The Magna Carta hadn't done that. Only the Constitution says the government exists because the people are the source of the reason it exists. They immediately followed those first three words with the words to form a more perfect union. The founders did not say to form a perfect union. They did not claim that in our new country nothing would need to be improved. Fortunately, they understood that always working to be better would be the hallmark of a great democracy. The freedoms we have today, the nation we have today, is not here just because it happened, and they aren't complete. A great democracy working through the successes and failures of our history, striving to be better than it had been. And we are more than we have been, and we are less than we hope to be. The assault on our Capitol at this very place just 2 weeks ago reminds us that a government designed to balance and check itself is both fragile and resilient. During the last year, the pandemic challenged our free and open society and called for extraordinary determination and sacrifice, and still challenges us today. Meeting that challenge head on have been and are healthcare workers, scientists, first responders, essential frontline workers, and so many others we depend on in so many ways. Today we come to this moment. People all over the world, as we're here, are watching and will watch what we do here. Our government comes together. The Congress and the courts join the transition of executive responsibility. One political party more pleased today and on every inaugural day than the other. But this is not a moment of division, it's a moment of unification. A new administration begins and brings with it a new beginning. And with that, our great national debate goes forward, and a determined democracy will continue to be essential in pursuit of a more perfect union and a better future for all Americans. What a privilege for me to join you today. Thank you. I'm pleased to call to the podium a longtime friend of the President-elect and his family, Father Leo O'Donovan, to lead us in an invocation. Please stand if you are able and remain standing for the national anthem and the pledge to our flag.
The invocation being delivered by Father Leo O'Donovan, as you just heard, a longtime friend of the Bidens. He also officiated Beau Biden's funeral back in 2015. Vice President-elect Joe Biden also wrote the foreword to O'Donovan's most recent book called Blessed Are the Refugees, Beatitudes of Immigrant Children. Let's listen in.
Gracious and merciful God, at this sacred time we come before you in need, indeed on our knees. But we come still more with hope and with our eyes raised anew to the vision of a more perfect union in our land, a union of all our citizens to promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We are a people of many races, creeds, and colors, national backgrounds, cultures, and styles, now far more numerous and on land much vaster than when Archbishop John Carroll wrote his prayer for the inauguration of George Washington 232 years ago. Archbishop Carroll prayed that you, O Creator of all, would assist with your Holy Spirit of counsel and fortitude the President of these United States, that his administration may be conducted in righteousness and be eminently useful to your people. Today we confess our past failures to live according to our vision of equality, inclusion, and freedom for all. Yet we resolutely commit still more now to renewing the vision, to caring for one another in word and deed, especially the least fortunate among us, and so becoming a light for the world. There is a power in each and every one of us that lives by turning to every other one of us, a thrust of the Spirit to cherish and care and stand by others, and above all, those most in need. It is called love, and its path is to give ever more of itself. Today, it is called American patriotism, born not of power and privilege, but of care for the common good, with malice toward none and with charity for all. For our new president, we beg of you the wisdom Solomon sought when he knelt before you and prayed for an understanding heart, so that I can govern your people and know the difference between right and wrong. We trust in the counsel of the letter of James. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Pope Francis has reminded us how important it is to dream together. By ourselves, he wrote, we risk seeing mirages, things that are not there. Dreams, on the other hand, are built together. Be with us, holy mystery of love, as we dream together. Help us under our new president to reconcile the people of our land, restore our dream and invest it with peace and justice and the joy that is the overflow of love. To the glory of your name, forever, amen.
And that was Father Leo O'Donovan giving the invocation at Joseph R. Biden's swearing-in ceremony. He is a Jesuit priest, director of Jesuit Refugee Services, and the former president of Georgetown University, a longtime friend of President Biden.
And you can see them just sharing a moment, private conversation there on a very public stage. In just a moment, we will be hearing the national anthem delivered and sung by Lady Gaga.
By the Armed Forces Color Guard, the singing of our national anthem, and for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ladies and gentlemen, here for the singing of our national anthem, accompanied by the President's own United States Marine Band, please welcome Lady Gaga.
so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Only in the free and the
Lady Gaga with the national anthem. And up next, Andrea Hall will lead the Pledge of Allegiance. Andrea Hall, a Georgia firefighter who became the first black female fire captain of the South Fulton, Georgia Fire Department.
It's a very stirring rendition of the national anthem. You can see on the stage there former presidents along with the current Vice President Mike Pence, who is on stage as we prepare to hear from, as Jenna just said, Andrea Hall.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Andrea Hall signing and speaking the Pledge of Allegiance.
Next up will be one of the formal ceremonies that we're waiting to see, the swearing in of Vice President
all about to be part
Kamala
of
Harris.
America
Let's
is
listen in.
a historic moment of firsts. To administer the oath to our first African American, our first Asian American, and our first woman Vice President, Kamala Harris, it is my great privilege to welcome to the inaugural stage the first Latina to ever serve on the Supreme Court of the United States of America, Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the oath of office, followed by musical honors.
Kamala Harris, former California Attorney General, former senator from California, about to be sworn in. The Bible, as we mentioned.
Two Bibles. One from a mother-like figure.
Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear.
I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
That I will well and faithfully discharge.
That I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
The duties of the office upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
All right.
Harris, now the Vice President of the United States, as she takes her oath of office. As we mentioned, two Bibles she was just sworn in on, one from a mother-like figure of hers and the other from the first black Supreme Court Justice, Thurgood Marshall. Harris has described the civil rights icon as a personal hero.
You know, a historic moment not just for her breaking through barriers as the first female vice president, first person of color, but also the person standing next to her on stage. Her husband, Doug Emhoff, becomes the first second gentleman.
And next we have Jennifer Lopez, who will perform Americana musical selections.
Please be seated.
Just looked up the report, and it's in the low 40s, quite windy. And
please welcome Jennifer Lopez to perform "This Land Is Your Land" and "America the Beautiful," accompanied by members of the President's own
what I noticed
United
as well
States Marine
is the
Band.
masks. We've never seen anything quite like this. Everybody in attendance, of course, wearing a mask because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Very true. Also, the crowds that we normally see scaled down due to not only the pandemic, but because of the security concerns from 2 weeks ago today, the events that we saw unfold right there on that platform.
It's a very pared down inauguration, indeed.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking down that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. Oh, this land, oh, this land. This land was made for you and me. Oh, this land. Oh, this land. This land was made for you and me. You and me. Oh, America, America, God shed His grace on thee and crowned thy good with brotherhood. From sea to shining una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. Let's get loud. 'Cause this land was made for you and me.
And Jennifer Lopez with a very American musical selection. This Land Is Your Land, America the Beautiful. A very impassioned performance from the performer and entertainer.
Let's go ahead and listen to Amy Klobuchar
The
introduce.
sun is shining, and Mr. President-elect, this is the first inauguration in the history of America where J-Lo was the warm-up act for Chief Justice Roberts. With that, it is now my distinct honor to introduce the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, John Roberts, to administer the presidential oath to the next President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the oath of office, followed by musical honors.
Joe Biden gets ready to take his oath of office with his family by his side. He will be sworn in on a family Bible belonging to his family.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Joseph Robinette Biden, Jr., do solemnly swear.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden, Jr., do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
Office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
And there you have it. Joe Biden, now officially the 46th President of the United States of America, being greeted by his family. Of course, now the new First Lady Jill Biden, his children, Hunter and Ashley Biden, surrounded by his grandchildren as well.
And now we wait for him to give his first address as President of the United States. This is the 59th inauguration of a U.S. president. He, as John mentioned, will be the 46th President of the United States.
Biden beginning his term at a very turbulent time in American history, 10 months into a pandemic that sapped the country's spirit, crippled the economy and our healthcare system, not to mention a nation very divided along political, racial, and socioeconomic lines. He will try to touch on all of those things today with a message, we're told, of unity that might last around 20 minutes or so.
Ladies and gentlemen,
the theme of his speech, America United.
We believe next up.
Musical honors are playing right now. You are looking at the United States Capitol as Joseph R. Biden Jr. is sworn into office. This, of course, the exact location where just a few weeks ago on January 6th, an assault on the Capitol took place. It is a very pared-down inauguration compared to years past because of the pandemic and COVID-19 health concerns and also security concerns because of that siege on the Capitol.
Pared down. What is not pared down is the amount of security. Some 25,000 National Guard troops on hand to secure this inauguration.
My fellow Americans, a moment we have all been waiting for. It is now my great privilege and high honor to be the first person to officially introduce the 46th President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden, Jr.
Chief Justice Roberts, Vice President Harris, Speaker Pelosi, Leader Schumer, Leader McConnell, Vice President Pence, my distinguished guests, my fellow Americans. This is America's day. This is democracy's day, a day of history and hope, of renewal and resolve. Through a crucible for the ages, America has been tested anew, and America has risen to the challenge. Today, we celebrate the triumph not of a candidate, but of a cause, the cause of democracy. The people, the will of the people has been heard, and the will of the people has been heeded. We've learned again that democracy is precious, democracy is fragile, and at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed. So now, on this hallowed ground where just a few days ago, violence sought to shake the Capitol's very foundation, we come together as one nation, under God, indivisible, to carry out the peaceful transfer of power as we have for more than 2 centuries. As we look ahead in our uniquely American way, restless, bold, optimistic, and set our sights on the nation we know we can be and we must be. I thank my predecessors of both parties for their presence here today. I thank them from the bottom of my heart. And I know the resilience of our Constitution and the strength of our nation, as does President Carter, who I spoke with last night, who cannot be with us today, but whom we salute for his lifetime in service. I've just taken the sacred oath each of those patriots have taken, the oath first sworn by George Washington. But the American story depends not on any one of us, not on some of us, but on all of us, on we the people who seek a more perfect union. This is a great nation. We are good people. And over the centuries, through storm and strife, in peace and in war, we've come so far, but we still have far to go. We'll press forward with speed and urgency, for we have much to do in this winter of peril and significant possibilities. Much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build, and much to gain. Few people in our nation's history have been more challenged or found a time more challenging or difficult than the time we're in now. Once-in-a-century virus that silently stalks the country has taken as many lives in 1 year as America lost in all of World War II. Millions of jobs have been lost. Hundreds of thousands of businesses closed. A cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us. The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. A cry for survival comes from the planet itself, a cry that can't be any more desperate or any more clear. And now, a rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism, that we must confront and we will defeat. To overcome these challenges, to restore the soul and secure the future of America, requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity. Unity. In another January, on New Year's Day in 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. When he put pen to paper, the president said, and I quote, "If my name ever goes down into history, It'll be for this act, and my whole soul is in it. My whole soul is in it. Today, on this January day, my whole soul is in this. Bringing America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause. Uniting to fight the foes we face: anger, resentment and hatred, extremism, lawlessness, violence, disease, joblessness, and hopelessness. With unity, we can do great things, important things. We can right wrongs. We can put people to work in good jobs. We can teach our children in safe schools. We can overcome the deadly virus. We can reward work and rebuild the middle class and make health care secure for all. We can deliver racial justice, and we can make America once again the leading force for good in the world. I know speaking of unity can sound to some like a foolish fantasy these days. I know the forces that divide us are deep and they are real. But I also know they are not new. Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal that we're all created equal and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart. The battle is perennial, and victory is never assured. Through Civil War, the Great Depression, World War, 9/11, through struggle, sacrifice, and setbacks, our better angels have always prevailed. In each of these moments, enough of us have come together to carry all of us forward. And we can do that now. History, faith, and reason show the way of unity. We can see each other not as adversaries, but as neighbors. We can treat each other with dignity and respect. We can join forces, stop the shouting, and lower the temperature. For without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury. No progress, only exhausting outrage. No nation, only a state of chaos. This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge, and unity is the path forward. And we must meet this moment as the United States of America. If we do that, I guarantee you we will not fail. We have never, ever, ever, ever failed in America when we've acted together. And so today, at this time, in this place, let's start afresh, all of us. Let's begin to listen to one another again, hear one another, see one another, show respect to one another. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. And we must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured. My fellow Americans, we have to be different than this. America has to be better than this. And I believe America is so much better than this. Just look around. Here we stand in the shadow of the Capitol Dome, as was mentioned earlier, completed amid the Civil War, when the Union itself was literally hanging in the balance. Yet we endured. We prevailed. Here we stand, looking out on the Great Mall, where Dr. King spoke of his dream. Here we stand where 108 years ago, at another inaugural, thousands of protesters tried to block brave women marching for the right to vote. And today, we mark the swearing in of the first woman in American history elected to national office, Vice President Kamala Harris. Don't tell me things can't change. here we stand across the Potomac from Arlington Cemetery, where heroes who gave the last full measure of devotion rest in eternal peace. And here we stand, just days after a riotous mob thought they could use violence to silence the will of the people, to stop the work of our democracy, to drive us from this sacred ground. It did not happen. It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Not ever. To all those who supported our campaign, I'm humbled by the faith you've placed in us. To all those who did not support us, let me say this. Hear me out as we move forward. Take a measure of me and my heart. And if you still disagree, so be it. That's democracy. That's America. The right to dissent peaceably within the guardrails of our republic is perhaps this nation's greatest strength. Yet hear me clearly. Disagreement must not lead to disunion. And I pledge this to you. I will be a president for all Americans. All Americans. And I promise you, I will fight as hard for those who did not support me as for those who did. Many centuries ago, St. Augustine, a saint of my church, wrote that a people was a multitude defined by the common objects of their love. Defined by the common objects of their love. What are the common objects we as Americans love that define us as Americans? I think we know. Opportunity, security, liberty, dignity, respect, honor, and yes, the truth. Recent weeks and months have taught us a painful lesson. There is truth and there are lies. Lies told for power and for profit. And each of us has a duty and a responsibility as citizens, as Americans, and especially as leaders. Leaders who have pledged to honor our Constitution and protect our nation, to defend the truth and defeat the lies. Look, I understand that many of my fellow Americans view the future with fear and trepidation. I understand they worry about their jobs. I understand, like my dad, they lay at bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering, can I keep my health care? Can I pay my mortgage? Thinking about their families, about what comes next. I promise you, I get it. But the answer is not to turn inward, to retreat into competing factions, distrusting those who don't look like you, or worship the way you do, or don't get their news from the same sources you do. We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility, and if we're willing to stand in the other person's shoes, as my mom would say, just for a moment, stand in their shoes. Because here's the thing about life. There's no accounting for what fate will deal you. Some days, when you need a hand. There are other days when we're called to lend a hand. That's how it has to be. That's what we do for one another. And if we are this way, our country will be stronger, more prosperous, more ready for the future. And we can still disagree. My fellow Americans, in the work ahead of us, we're going to need each other. We need all our strength to persevere through this dark winter. We're entering what may be the toughest and deadliest period of the virus. We must set aside politics and finally face this pandemic as one nation. One nation. And I promise you this, as the Bible says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. We will get through this together. Together. Look, folks, all my colleagues I serve with in the House and the Senate up here, we all understand the world is watching all of us today. So here's my message to those beyond our borders. America has been tested, and we've come out stronger for it. We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again, not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges. And we'll lead not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. We'll be a strong and trusted partner for peace, progress, and security. Look, you all know we've been through so much in this nation. And in my first act as president, I'd like to ask you to join me in a moment of silent prayer. Remember all those who we lost in this past year to the pandemic. Those 400,000 fellow Americans, moms, dads, husbands, wives, sons, daughters, friends, neighbors, and co-workers. We'll honor them by becoming the people and the nation we know we can and should be. So I ask you, let's say a silent prayer for those who've lost their lives and those left behind, and for our country. Amen. Folks, this is a time of testing. We face an attack on our democracy and on truth, a raging virus, growing inequity, the sting of systemic racism, a climate in crisis, America's role in the world. Any one of these would be enough to challenge us in profound ways. But the fact is, we face them all at once, presenting this nation with one of the gravest responsibilities we've had. Now we're going to be tested. Are we going to step up, all of us? It's time for boldness, for there's so much to do. And this is certain. I promise you, we will be judged, you and I, by how we resolve these cascading crises of our era. We will rise to the occasion is the question. Will we master this rare and difficult hour? Will we meet our obligations and pass along a new and better world to our children? I believe we must. I'm sure you do as well. I believe we will. And when we do, we'll write the next great chapter in the history of the United States of America, the American story. A story that might sound something like a song that means a lot to me. It's called American Anthem. There's one verse that stands out, at least for me, and it goes like this. The work and prayers of century have brought us to this day. What shall be our legacy? What will our children say? Let me know in my heart when my days are through. America, America, I gave my best to you. Let's us add our own work and prayers to the unfolding story of our great nation. If we do this, then when our days are through, our children and our children's children will say of us, they gave their best, they did their duty, they healed a broken land. My fellow Americans, I close the day where I began, with the sacred oath. Before God and all of you, I give you my word. I will always level with you. I will defend the Constitution. I'll defend our democracy. I'll defend America. And I'll give all of you, keep everything I do in your service, thinking not of power, but of possibilities, not of personal interest, but the public good. And together we shall write an American story of hope, not fear, of unity, not division, of light, not darkness, a story of decency and dignity, love and healing, greatness and goodness. May this be the story that guides us, the story that inspires us, and the story that tells ages yet to come that we answered the call of history. We met the moment. Democracy and hope, truth and justice did not die on our watch but thrived. That America secured liberty at home and stood once again as a beacon to the world. That is what we owe our forebears, one another, and generation to follow. So, with purpose and resolve, we turn to those tasks of our time, sustained by faith, driven by conviction, and devoted to one another and the country we love with all our hearts. May God bless America, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, America.
Sixth President of the United States deliver his inaugural address. Heavy themes on unity, on healing, pledging to be a president for all Americans, not just the people who voted for him. In just a few moments, we will also hear the benediction, which will be coming from the Reverend Dr. Sylvester Beeman, a close friend, again, of the Biden family, who also participated in Beau Biden's funeral service. Should also mention that...
ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Garth Brooks to perform Amazing
a surprise
Grace.
performance.
A surprise performance.
By Garth Brooks.
Biden's speech, we should mention, President Biden's speech came in at, I believe, 22 minutes. So as expected, around the 20-minute mark. And here we have country music legend, Garth Brooks.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. If I can ask you to sing this last verse with me, not just the people here, but the people at home, at work, as one, united. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Amen.
That was Garth Brooks, country music star, with an a cappella version of Amazing Grace, asking people not just there on the inaugural platform to sing along with him, but people around the country who may be watching as you are on TV or streaming. And we're about to close out the service here. Let's listen in to Chairman of the Joint Congressional Committee on the Inauguration, Roy Blunt.
Hard not to be reminded of President Obama's singing that same song at the Mother Emanuel Church. A song that in our culture is as close to both poetry and prayer as you could possibly come. And we're going to finish with those two things. Let me introduce Amanda Gorman, our nation's first ever National Poet Laureate.
And this is Amanda Gorman from Los Angeles. Like Biden, overcame a speech impediment and the first National Youth Poet Laureate of 2017. Let's go ahead and listen in.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is hours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gaze not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew. That even as we hurt, we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. That we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it in its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left with.
And that again was Amanda Gorman. She is delivering the poem, the former National Youth Poet Laureate. We're going to try to hang on to that feed for just a moment and get the benediction from the Reverend Dr. Sylvester Beeman. I think we have that audio back, so let's just go ahead and listen back in.
The sun-baked South, we will rebuild, reconcile, and recover. In every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country, our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Yeah, that was Amanda Gorman, the first National Youth Poet Laureate 2017. And like Biden, she overcame a speech impediment. She's from Los Angeles.
I was listening to an interview with her yesterday, and she had problems pronouncing her R's, so she was about trying to avoid words with R's. Let's go ahead and listen in a little bit more.
Pastor of the Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Wilmington, Delaware, a friend of President Biden for 30 years.
As a nation and people of faith gathered in this historical moment, let us unite in prayer. God, we gather under the beauty of your holiness and the holiness of your beauty. We seek your face, your smile, your warm embrace. We petition you once more in this celebration. We pray for divine favor upon our President, Joseph R. Biden, and our First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, and their family. We further ask that you would extend the same favor upon our Vice President, Kamala D. Harris, and our second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, and their family. More than ever, they and our nation need you. We need you, for in you we discover our common humanity. In our common humanity, we will seek out the wounded and bind their wounds. We will seek healing for those who are sick and diseased. We will mourn our dead. We will befriend the lonely, the least, and the left out. We will share our abundance with those who are hungry. We will do justly to the oppressed, acknowledge sin, and seek forgiveness, thus grasping reconciliation. In discovering our humanity, we will seek the good in and for all our neighbors. We will love the unlovable, remove the stigma of the so-called untouchables. We will care for our most vulnerable, our children, the elderly, emotionally challenged, and the poor. We will seek rehabilitation beyond correction. We will extend opportunity to those locked out of opportunity. We will make friends of our enemies. We will make friends of our enemies. People, your people, shall no longer raise up weapons against one another. We will rather use our resources for the national good and become a beacon of life and goodwill to the world. And neither shall we learn hatred anymore. We will lie down in peace and not make our neighbors afraid. In you, O God, we discover our humanity. In our humanity, we discover our commonness. Beyond the difference of color, creed, origin, political party, ideology, geography, and personal preferences. We'll become greater stewards of your environment, preserving the land, reaping from it a sustainable harvest, and securing its wonder and miracle-giving power for generations to come. This is our benediction, that from these hallowed grounds, where slaves labored to build this shrine and citadel to liberty and democracy, let us all acknowledge, from the indigenous Native American to those who recently received their citizenship, from the African American to those whose foreparents came from Europe and every corner of the globe, from the wealthy to those struggling to make it, from every human being regardless of their choices, that this is our country. As such, teach us, O God. As such, teach us, O God, to live in it, love in it, be healed in it, and reconcile to one another in it, lest we miss kingdom's goal. To your glory, majesty, dominion, and power forever. Hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. In the strong name of our collective faith. Amen.
Please remain standing as the Armed Forces Color Guard retires our national colors.
And that was Reverend Dr. Sylvester Beeman giving the benediction. His friendship with President Biden dates back to 1993, when Beeman became the pastor of Bethel AME Church in Wilmington, Delaware. He is especially close to Biden because of Biden's son, Beau, and worked on social issues with Beau and participated in Beau's 2015 funeral.
You know, Jenna, there are a lot of references to God, to faith, even the passage that Joe Biden mentioned in his speech from Psalm 3, that weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning, really showcasing Biden's deep and abiding Catholic faith, becoming only the second Catholic president of the United States, just behind, of course, John F. Kennedy.
Mm-hmm. He also,
ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
Asked for a silent prayer for those who have died in the pandemic.
For safety reasons, your ushers will release your section in an organized manner. Following the
at this moment in our country's history, a very testing and trying time, he's calling on Americans to unite, to go to their faith, and to be one.
Really summoning all Americans in this effort for unity, saying that it can't just be a partial drive, it has to really involve everyone, which is one of the statements that he made during his speech, that he would be a president for all Americans, not just those who voted for him, but those who didn't vote for him. And of course, now comes the hard work. Now comes the persuading campaign. Will those who didn't vote for him, and even those who didn't believe that he rightfully won the election. Can he make the inroads to appeal to them and show that he will be a president for all Americans? That will be the true test.
He put the words out there today. We'll see if he can put the action behind them. One moment in the speech, he mentioned Abraham Lincoln. Back in 1863, on another January day, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, another very testy and difficult time in our country's history. And just like Abraham Lincoln at that point, President Biden said his whole soul is in this, and that is uniting the country and where it is today. He asked and urged all Americans to join him in standing together in these times.
There you see Joe Biden and Jill Biden, now the 46th American president of the United States and new First Lady, exiting the inaugural platform there on the west front of the Capitol. Just saw the shot of Kamala Harris, the new vice president of the United States of America. Just a really big day for the nation. Every 4 years we go through this ritual with a lot of fanfare, a lot of pomp and circumstance. As we were talking about earlier, just really scaled down from what we normally see, not only because of the pandemic, but because of the security concerns. We saw less people, not just as far as crowds, but less people on the stage. And two people who stand out in particular. Joe Biden mentioned one by name, which was Jimmy Carter, who couldn't make it because of his health. There was another president who was not able to make it, or I should probably say chose not to make it, and that was President Trump.
With that, we want to bring in our chief political analyst, David Brody, and senior Washington correspondent, Jennifer Wishon, who are with us for some analysis. Both of you, welcome. It's good to have you on this today. We just want to get your initial thoughts. Jennifer, let's start with you. What did you make of President Biden's inaugural speech?
Well, I think we couldn't help but be struck by the solemnness of this ceremony today. As John was just pointing out, it lacked the energy of hundreds of thousands of Americans on the National Mall, and probably was appropriate considering what just happened at the Capitol. But, you know, I think more than what President Biden had to say was the importance of having this ceremony today. It is a purely American ceremony. It is a celebration of everything we are. It inspires Americans. It inspires people across the globe. It is a pause in political sparring just for a moment. Now, President Biden's getting ready to go sign some executive orders that are going to make people upset. But for this moment, it was free of politics. And you know, just a time for unity after an election. And as President Biden said it, this is Americans' day. And I really felt that. I felt that people really needed to see this moment of unity, the songs that were sung, you know, saying the Pledge of Allegiance, the things that bind all of us as Americans. It was important to see that today. In terms of what President Biden had to say, I think that it was a very important first time that he's really addressed Trump supporters, and not by name, but we really saw a heartfelt reach out to all Americans. Jenna, as you said, he said that his whole soul is in this, trying to unify the country. And he also asked Americans, those people who did not support him in the election, to take a measure of me in my heart. And so I think this was an important first step. He certainly has a lot of work to do. His administration has a lot of work to do, and we'll see what happens from here.
David, the theme of the speech, America United. Did President Biden strike that tone?
Oh, 100%. I thought it was a great speech, an absolutely great speech. I thought the line of the speech is, we must end this uncivil war. And if I could add a few notes, or at least words after that, I would say ... on both sides. I mean, this cuts both ways. It's not, you know, it's not just about Trump supporters or Biden supporters or conservatives or liberals. It's everybody. I thought it was great. Now, the question now becomes, John and Jenna, those are words. It was a great speech, but actions speak louder than words. And it's not just actions, but it's olive branch actions. And so I see this as two different facets here for Joe Biden going forward. There's the legislative facet, as he moves forward, where you got to get legislative stuff done. And look, the truth of the matter is most Trump supporters are not going to agree with most of Joe Biden's policies. But he even said that in the speech. He says, you know, it is what it is. That's okay. And you know what? It is okay. I mean, maybe I understand those policies are going to affect America in the next 4 years for sure. But what's a larger issue here is how we talk to each other, how we listen to one another, which is what Joe Biden was trying to say. Now, here's the deal, as Joe Biden would say. He'd say, come on, man, here's the deal. He's got to put up or shut up at this point. In other words, he had a great speech, but what are you going to do to extend the olive branch to Trump supporters? Not to Mitt Romney, not to Lisa Murkowski, not to some of your centrist buddies that you've been having the Navy bean soup with in the Senate for 42 years. What are you going to be doing to the Trump supporters? What are you going to be saying to them? He addressed them today, which is great, but what are the actions that follow? That's what I'm going to be looking for. I think he's pretty limited in what the actions can be for Trump supporters. It's not going to be on policy. I mean, he's not going to turn into a pro-life president, right? I mean, but the question is he going to pack the courts? Is he going to go with Schumer on that? There's a lot of other AOC/Schumer/other liberal policies that he could potentially hold back on. So we'll wait and see. I thought it was a great speech, though. And once again, I agree with Jennifer. I think she hit it right on the head when she said, in essence here, that Joe Biden rose to kind of the solemnness of the occasion. And one last thing I just want to point out, you know, Donald Trump ripped the Band-Aid off for 4 years. And by the way, he did it every single day. He kept ripping the Band-Aid off, ripping the Band-Aid. And you know what? Sometimes ripping the Band-Aid off can be a good thing. Hear me out. Can be a good thing because it reveals deep divisions that are buried inside this country. And that's exactly what he did. Joe Biden is hoping to be, if you will, the Neosporin after the Band-Aid's been ripped off. We'll see how it goes.
Jennifer, I think David teed you up quite well. You know, you covered the White House under the Obama administration and at the beginning of the Trump administration. Can you talk about the changes we can expect from what will now be the Trump legacy to Biden's agenda now that he is in the White House?
Well, yes, I mean, my goodness, the changes from Obama to Trump were just incredibly drastic. And I think we'll probably see the change tonight when the new press secretary under President Biden holds her first press briefing. And I think you're going to see a return to very much the Obama era type of information sharing, if you will, from an administration. I think we're going to see you know, a lot of the chaos kind of taken away. And some people may say the chaos was good because you had, for example, in the press briefing, people asking questions and getting questions answered that had never or were rarely called on during the Obama administration, and to some extent, the Bush administration before that. So I think tonight is going to be the first glimpse as to what we can expect from this administration. But again, I think they're going to do everything they can in terms of optics to not look like the Trump administration.
Country incredibly divided right now. There are many still trying to understand how we got to the January 6th assault on the Capitol. Has any president to date faced this kind of challenge that President Biden now faces?
Yes. Well, I mean, he's been mentioned several times today. You can't help but think about Abraham Lincoln. He took the oath of office in 1861 in January, and in April, so in a matter of weeks, the Civil War began. So he was on the edge of the country literally breaking in two. And you can only imagine the challenges that he faced. And I loved what Amy Klobuchar shared about Lincoln's insistence that they continue building the Capitol during the Civil War, despite criticism, because he said that as long as we're building this, Americans will see that the Union will once again be reunited. So you can't help but think about that example. You also can't help but realize that today we're still reeling in some ways or living through the effects of the Civil War. I mean, there are so many ways that we're still healing from that. And, you know, many Americans would say that today, this is the most divided we've ever been since the Civil War. And so this is a process. This is going to take a lot of time to unify. And I agree with David in his pointing out of what Biden said. Look, not everyone's going to agree with my policies, but that is okay. Not everyone agreed with Trump's policies, and that's okay. And we just have to remember that as Americans. And that's why I think for me, I was struck today by the importance of seeing the things that unite us as Americans, the pledge, the national anthem, being at the Capitol, which is everyone's capital. I just think seeing that today was so important.
Happens every 4 years, as was mentioned, since 1789. David, let's talk a little bit about President Trump. He is the first president since Andrew Johnson not to attend his successor's inauguration. You know, we talk a lot about the fanfare and a lot about the ritual. This is something that we didn't see. Normally we see former or outgoing presidents meet at the White House with the incoming president, take that symbolic trip down Pennsylvania Avenue from the White House to the Capitol. Of course, we didn't see it this year. What do you make of Trump's decision to avoid the inauguration altogether?
I know a lot of people are going to think it's a big deal that he didn't go. Look, it's happened 3 times in our history. You mentioned Andrew Johnson the last time. It also happened with John Adams and also John Quincy Adams. All 3 times before this, it was a disputed election. And guess what? This is entry number 4, another disputed election, according to Donald Trump and many of his supporters. And so it doesn't surprise me that he didn't go. Mike Pence was there, awkward. Mitch McConnell was there, a bit awkward as well. But beyond that, look, I mean, you know, Donald Trump's going to do what Donald Trump's going to do. And did anybody really expect him to be there? And even Joe Biden said he really would prefer he not be there. And let's also be honest. If President Trump, let's take this through for a second, John and Jenna. If President Trump showed up at the inauguration, do we really think that it was going to do anything, even symbolically? Really, seriously. I mean, it's rhetorical. Maybe it's not even a rhetorical question. I'd ask you both. I mean, do we really think that would do anything? I mean, people will say, oh, but it looks good. Well, so what? So what? So it looks good, but is it really going to change the healing in this country? No. There is dirty work that needs to be done to heal this country, and it starts with this administration, President Joe Biden.
David, we know that President Biden plans to sign a series, over a dozen executive orders right off the bat. What can we expect, and do you think this will help or hurt the state of unity in our country?
Well, it's going to, well, it probably won't help unity for sure, because it's going to be a flurry and it's going to happen quickly. At least there's 15 that he's going to sign today, and over the course of the next month, it's going to be obviously many, many more. But we're talking about he's going to stop the border wall construction, number 1. He's going to stop the Keystone Pipeline construction, or the permit thereof. He's going to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord. Those are 3. He's going to, well, there's so many more on border security as well. He's going to start some sort of, he's going to fortify DACA into, I say, law. Somehow he's going to fortify DACA. And so you just go down the line. COVID, he's going to rejoin the WHO, the World Health Organization. So there's going to be a flurry of activity. He's going to get rid of the, the media calls it the Muslim ban. I hate that. It's not the Muslim ban. It's basically a ban on majority Muslim countries, some of them who have terrorist connections. But he's going to say, no, come on in from those countries. So he's changing everything, and it all happens on day 1. So it's not going to lead to unity at the beginning, but he'll have some work to do for sure.
For final thoughts as we close our coverage of the inauguration, and Jennifer, if I can, maybe just get you to piggyback real quickly on that question from Jenna. Any concern when it comes to evangelicals, who of course have been a strong supporting group for President Trump? Any concern about some of the series of executive orders and achievements from the Trump administration, about some of those accomplishments being eroded by any of these executive orders that might be signed tonight?
Sure. Well, I mean, you know, evangelicals are very concerned about life. President Trump, the most pro-life president we've ever had, and we're going to see that start to erode immediately. And, you know, that's another reason why we're just talking about executive orders. That's another reason why it's important for these ideas that presidents have to be put in through legislation into law, because what we're seeing is, you know, every 4 years, every 8 years, one president signs a bunch of executive orders, the next president comes in and undoes them. Trump did it to Obama, Obama did it to Bush, and we're seeing Biden do it to Trump. And I think, you know, if Congress was a bit more effective, then they could, you know, get some of these measures passed into law, and we wouldn't see this kind of back and forth with the executive pen. But the good thing about an executive order is that it can be overturned by a next president. But, you know, I would say final thoughts going forward. The speech was all about unity. This president has the biggest bully pulpit in the world now, and he has an opportunity to use it. You talked about evangelicals, John. You know, this idea that people who, you know, have a biblical worldview on the left, that they're painted as kooky. The president can put an end to that. He can put an end. He can tell big tech that it's un-American to censor people. Yes, you're a private company, but that's not an American way to deal with things. That we should have an open idea or open exchange of ideas, and that, you know, everyone who supported President Trump is not an extremist. Certainly there were people at the Capitol that day who were not extremists. You know, he can, you know, put out there that people who worked in the Trump administration should not be ostracized in the workplace now. That's un-American. And so I think he has an important role to play here, and to use his bully pulpit to really, as David said, you know, put actions behind his words and try to ease the tension in the country right now. David, real quickly here.
Donald Trump goes down as one of the most consequential presidents in United States history, plain and simple. And I will say this, for all of the Trump supporters that are mourning today, we know our hope is in Jesus. We know our hope is not in Donald Trump. We know our hope is not in Joe Biden. It's in Jesus. And I think those are important words to remember. It's not my words. It's God's word. So let's remember that. But Donald Trump does go down as one of the most consequential presidents in U.S. history. He has 3 Supreme Court judges that will affect a generation on the court. He has a record-setting number of lower federal appeals court judges that will affect a generation to come. He started a grassroots movement seen like none other in American history. MAGA Nation. It's never been done before. Something like that has never been done before. And finally, he revealed the deep state. And when I say the deep state, let me be clear, because I know everybody hears deep state and they think conspiracy. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the dirty underbelly of Washington. What goes on behind the scenes, whether it be James Comey and the FBI or Andrew McCabe, or we can talk about stuff that when he opens up pool sprays, if you will, in other words, the cameras, he says, come on, let's go, bring in the camera, and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Donald Trump, and we're going to have our meeting broadcast to everyone. No president has done that. He has revealed the dirty little secrets in Washington like no other president. That makes him consequential. His movement is consequential, and his change will lead to a generational change on the Supreme Court and many other courts for decades to come.
Yeah.
The end of one presidency, the start of another. David, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us for this special coverage this morning.
Thank you both.
You've been watching special coverage of the inauguration of Joe Biden, the President of the United States.
And as we wrap up our coverage, we want to encourage you to join us right back here at 6 o'clock tonight for Faith Nation. We will have a full wrap-up of today's events.
We hope to see you then. For now, we'll send you back to CBN News Channel programming already in progress.
Well, hello, and we're going to continue coverage here on social media, joined by Trey Goins-Phillips, Dan Andros here, Trey there. And Trey, some good words there from David Brody and from Jennifer and everybody. Yeah. That was kind of my thoughts, too, wrapping up what we saw here with the inauguration of Joe Biden. In particular, the calls for unity are great. They're absolutely, I think, needed at this time, but it has to be backed up by actions, because you can't overlook if you're Joe Biden, if you're Kamala Harris, and anyone on the left, and you're calling for unity, you can't overlook your own role in the division. Remember, we're coming off of 4 years of something called the resistance, which started immediately when Donald Trump got into office. So in order for there to be a unity and a healing, you got to come forward a little bit, with an olive branch, as I think David said, and you need to own up to your own role in that division before healing can take place. Otherwise, you're just saying it's just going to fall on deaf ears, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's important that the left, particularly President Biden, needs to acknowledge that Trump didn't happen in a vacuum. The climate that we're in today didn't happen in a vacuum. It didn't come to be simply because conservatives are out to destroy democracy, or because Trump is some sort of evil actor on the national stage. All of this happened because there's blame on both sides, not only politically with our leaders, our elected leaders, but also in the way the media covered the previous administration, the administration now President Biden was a part of prior to Trump coming into office. So I think there's a big hurdle that Biden's going to have to get over. He can talk a lot of things. He talked a lot of peace, a lot of unity today. He said a lot of the right words. But now it's on him and Vice President Harris to take action that backs up those words, because the words by themselves don't do anything. It's the action that comes after them that's going to be most consequential, and is what a lot of people are going to be looking for, particularly conservatives, as they're worried about censorship, they're worried about the pro-life issue. So there are a lot of big things that people are going to be keeping an eye out for.
Right. Yeah, and there just seems to be, while it's the right tone, there just seems to be a lot of contradictory things, playing the national anthem when over the last 4 years we've seen all these calls, from that side primarily to kneel for the anthem. And the anthem is this representative of all that is bad. And, that to have the sudden flip, it's kind of jarring. Like, wait a minute, did I just witness the last 4 years, or what happened here? So I do think that that is very important for them to actually show that they believe, because they started off talking about, I believe early on in Biden's speech, he talked about, domestic, I don't know if he said white terrorism, but I do think he said, domestic sort of right-wing terrorism, but then didn't disassociate the 99.9% of the 74 million people who voted for Trump that are clearly not part of that group. So, you gotta, it's a little bit probably tough to swallow for some to hear that, but it is the right words. Let's not make the mistake there. It is the right words, but more needs to be done on that front. You can't just sit there and call, Christians bigoted and things like that, and then expect everyone just to forget about it. But I think the country is ready for a time of let's not be so divided. I mean, who is enjoying the division that much? But I think on the other hand, as Christians, we have to also understand that when we hold to biblical beliefs, when we hold to Christian values, that we're not going to be in harmony with the world. The world is going to be at odds with us. Those are Jesus's own words. He says that, expect that. So while we, again, according to the Bible, while we have to try to live as peacefully as possible, we have to understand that the world's not going to like what we have to say a lot of times.
Yeah, and I think too there's frustration over the fact that just like in the Obama years, there's this soaring rhetoric from our leaders now, where they feel like they can be divisive because they're using really eloquent words to do it. And I think there's a lot of concern among conservatives and among Christians that that's going to happen again, and then our media is kind of going to gaslight us into thinking, what, there's not any division, what are you talking about? So I think there's that concern. But something that was probably not really noticed that I picked up on is I happened to catch a glimpse during the closing prayer when the pastor was obviously praying for now President Biden and Vice President Harris, and I saw Karen Pence, our now former second lady, nodding along. in prayer. And that to me was encouraging. I've so appreciated the authentic Christian faith that the Pences have displayed in D.C., and I'll miss that. But I think it's an important picture for us to see that transition of power, that the Second Lady, former Second Lady Pence, as a Christian, is praying, not because they're a Democrat or Republican, but just praying for the betterment of the country, praying for their success. And I think it's an example that we can all hopefully follow in the days to come.
Indeed. And we've been watching along with you all in the chat. That is Trey and I. I mean, you probably see us pop on here on these YouTube feeds from time to time on these bigger events. And, you know, we are part of the CBN team, and we primarily focus on the social channels and the YouTube channel here, as well as faithwire.com. You can check that out. Our podcast 4 and 3, which is up on Faithwire's YouTube page, and you can find it on our website at faithwire.com, all part of the same family here. But we like to be in touch with you guys, in addition to, you know, what the main team is doing, John and Jenna and everybody else with their coverage. We like to connect with you guys a little more closely. And so we've been watching your chats, and we've been watching the things you're saying, and flagged a couple of the messages that we thought were important here. Becca said, Amazing Grace is for all to hear, especially for those who haven't been born again. That was after Garth Brooks performed that song as well. Amen to that. Austin said, far from perfect, but the division in this chat is saddening. There are a lot of differing opinions in there. Remember, God's will be done, even if we don't see it in our worldly system. He knows the bigger picture, and he knows how the story, and we know how the story ends, obviously, meaning who wins in the end. So we don't know God's ways. We don't understand that. And I think that is our hope to cling to when somebody in power that you maybe don't agree with is in. As David said as well, we got to cling to that hope in Christ, and that, yes, fight for our causes, continue your fight for, pro-life or whatever other issues you feel are important. But ultimately rest in God's sovereign plan. I always think back, Trey, to the story of Joseph, and when God says, if you look at the way God words it, what you meant for evil, I meant for good. And so it's not just, well, I made some good out of a tough situation. No, he says, I meant it for good. So God's working his purposes in all things, whether we don't understand it, just as Austin said there. A couple more here. Betty, the greatest weapon that you can use against the enemy is love. Again, commenting on how the chats, there's a lot of hatred for our enemies there. And that is tough. It's the toughest commandment. I mean, let's be honest. Loving your enemy, loving those who disagree with you is not easy at all. So a very difficult one there, but we got to remember it. These are the words God commanded us if we want to stand out as Christians. And then another comment, I don't have the username, but Biden is the new president. Pray for him and don't cling to the hope of Trump winning. Pray for Biden and hope that he repents. So amen. I mean, amen. We got to pray for our leaders. Again, these things that God commands us to, that's who we have to answer to. And that's what CBN answers to. Everybody here that works here at Faithwire and CBN, ultimately our highest standard is God, and that's who we are answering to. A lot of these other media networks, Trey, you're not going to get that. You're not going to get that. And so as big tech, we've seen the disturbing trend that they've had. We've reported on it multiple times as they continue to crack down on, different views from the approved, apparently, view. You got to support places like CBN and Faithwire and really connect with us. Just read 5 stories a day. I don't know what you have to do, but get in there and get involved in a community of like-minded believers. Because ultimately, we're not perfect. We'll make mistakes. But at the end of the day, though, we are trying to glorify God in all that we do and faithfully report the news. So that is what we're doing. I see a lot of times when people, when there's like a big news event, people are like, why are you covering this? Well, we're trying to faithfully cover the things that are going on and let you make your own decisions after that. But ultimately, that's our aim here. And so I think it's important for you guys, you complain if people are complaining about the mainstream media and how biased they are and how we've talked about it, Trey, that they sudden 180 shifts, suddenly it looks like they're not going to be so resisting against the Democratic president. You've got to support media networks that reflect your values. And CBN, if you're a Christian, is one of those. So So it's important for you to do your part and support those who can be a voice for your values.
Yeah, and I think too, just a political note is, we can obviously we've moved on to a new president, but you can still look back at the Trump administration and celebrate the successes that they did have. Obviously, the Abraham Accords with peace in the Middle East is a big one. Like David Brody mentioned, the transparency under the Trump administration was incredible. He gave a window in. And then even I noticed during the inauguration, we saw glimpses of 3 Supreme Court justices that he put on the bench. We saw the flag waving for a new branch of the military, the Space Force, that happened under President Trump. We developed a vaccine that's being rolled out as the inauguration was unfolding, even still, that's been rolling out for months now, a vaccine that would not necessarily have been possible at this point without Trump's leadership. So, we've inaugurated a new president, but don't let today kind of take away celebrating some of the successes of Trump as he's left office. Those are still things that we should take pride in as a country collectively, not Democrat or Republican, but they're the successes of a previous administration, and we should hope for and pray for the same in a coming administration.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking through the comments here. Mark Edwards says, Biden, is he a Christian? You say he has to repent. Well, all people should turn towards Christ and repent, and I would hope so. Then that would indicate that then they're choosing to believe and follow. I mean, Biden says he's Catholic, so we're going to take him at his word on that. You can look at his actions and decide what you want from there. But we got to take somebody at their word. Another Ed says, do you really believe Biden that he's for unity? So I think we noted what he said, and that was the theme of his speech. We also noted that he's got to back it up because after years of Democrats, calling Republicans and conservatives and Christians bigoted and, hateful and lumping them in with radical sort of extremists on the right. They have a lot of work to do to actually make that claim for unity appear authentic. And we said as much earlier here in the broadcast. So, and again, it's not a matter of what we believe. It's a matter of what happens. So Biden said he was going to try to unify in this speech, so let's see what he does, and I hope he does. But as we also mentioned, part of healing is you have to sort of admit your own fault. So if you were part of the division for 4 years, and aggressively so, you can't just tell people to heal and not admit to any of your own faults in that. That's just a basic way of, how healing works. You got to, if 2 sides have done wrong, both of you have to offer some sort of forgiveness. So that's that. I'm looking here some more of the comments. But again, it's going to be certainly a time for prayer. And here's one other thing I want to add, Trey, about possible. You think about the Equality Act and a lot of things that the Biden administration and the officials have talked about that they're going to pursue. Maybe some policies that aren't necessarily favorable to Christians. While we may not like it as Christians when things don't go our way as far as certain policies, pro-life policies, etc., we have to continue praying and again trust that plan that God has meant all this stuff for His greater purposes. And how can God use us in this time? Always be looking to glorify God in these situations. And sometimes, as it might not be as comfortable for us as Christians, but when we're on the outside looking in and we're not favored status in society, God's name is going to be glorified in that, and He's going to use that in great ways. So I would just say keep calm, keep on praying on, and keep on trying to glorify God in the midst of a trying and difficult circumstance. Doesn't mean we have to like it or enjoy all the things that are happening, but ultimately we're trying to please an audience of one here. And so hopefully people can keep that in mind.
And I saw last night a Christian author and professor, Karen Pryor. She tweeted, "We Christians are going to have so many new kinds of opportunities to model Christ in the world in coming days. I don't know what form this should take in each situation, but God has called us to take this task in this time. brothers and sisters, let's do this. And Priscilla Shire commented and said, I'm in. Beth Moore also responded and said that she wants to do likewise. So I think it's important for Christians, like you said, Dan, to come together and point to truth and point to hope that supersedes all of our politics. Because all of this will one day fade away. But obviously God's kingdom is forever. And that's where our ultimate hope is. That's where our allegiance is. We are Americans, but we're Christians, a part of God's kingdom and heirs to Christ, way before we pledge any sort of allegiance to our country. No matter how great it is, it's temporal and it's going to fall away. So, we need to call out things when we see them, praise the good things, rebuke the bad things. And know that our faith, hope, and trust lies with Jesus before anyone else.
Absolutely. Good stuff. And again, thank you for watching the inauguration of now President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris here on CBN. And we, of course, continue to ask you to pray for our country, pray for the leaders that are making decisions in this country, and pray for you. How can you find ways to glorify God in all that's happening? There's always going to be an opportunity for that, and maybe even greater opportunity, as I said, when we're on the outside looking in. And we certainly at CBN News are going to continue to try to find the ways God is working in the lives of people in the midst of all the craziness going on around us from 2020 and 2021. There is a lot of news that is going to be happening ahead, a lot of things you need to be aware of as Christians. And so we're going to keep you posted on all that, and we're going to all do it from a Christian perspective. So thanks, Trey. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for commenting in the chat. We appreciate you. We value you. We thank you for choosing us. We genuinely mean that. We're so glad you're here. And we just hope you have a blessed week. And we'll see you next big event that we're live streaming. God bless.